I'm joined tonight by Andy, Wallace, and Jane Friedhoff, and we're going to be talking about installation games, which is something a little different than we're normally talking about, but is something that I think is a really cool, different take on the indie game scene that more people should know about. So Andy and Jane, thank you for agreeing to talk to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi.
Hi. So Andy, you're associated with Long Island University, and Jane, you're a resident with the New York Game Lab, Game Innovation Lab. But you're both connected with the Death by Audio Arcade, which is really going to kind of be the main thing we focus on in talking about this. But I'm hoping you'd first tell us, before we get into all the specifics and all that, what got you into independent game design?
Yeah, that's
big question.
We both been making games pretty much since we were kids.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I got started just messing around with Flash in high school, basically, and then for most of college, I was taking a computer programming degree or a computer science degree, and I didn't like my classes, so I would just do Flash games all the time in my dorm, and that was pretty educational. And I've just been making games since then.
Yeah, I started when I was a kid. I think my earliest memory of making a game, or modding a game rather, was like playing some game where I realized I could find like the sprites and like change what colors they were. So it really just started from like doing silly things like that, making text adventures, that kind of thing, and then kind of growing it in scale. I actually never like had a computer science degree. I don't have any like formal background in that, but I kind of taught myself programming as I, kind of figured out the projects that I wanted to work on. So yeah, and then we both went to Parsons, which I feel like is where we really started to find out about like the indie game scene and individual artists making stuff.
Yeah, that's when I think we both became aware of like Indiecade or even New York Baby Castles, and all of that was super formative, and just being like, oh, there's people who actually want to do this stuff and like make small games. Like one person can make a game.
Right.
Wild. Other than like Newgrounds, Albino Black Sheep stuff, where it didn't feel like it was a community. It was just like I knew individual people made games, but I just thought they did it in their basement and then made no money off it. But now we do it in an apartment and make no money off it.
That's awesome. So what then drew you to installation games? Because really, where we met was at this past summer at Play NYC, and you were showing off a game called Salmon Roll, which really grabbed my attention because it's one of the first times I've ever seen an installation game in an indie setting. We'll have some footage going of Salmon Roll so you can kind of see what this is if you're watching this. But what drew you to explore that kind of side of the indie game world in a field that is already kind of a struggle in many ways to get noticed? Why do something so different?
I've always been interested in the idea of installation games, I guess because often they overlap with the idea of games in public space. And I'm always interested to see the way that game mechanics can allow people to behave differently than they would if they were just moving in a public space. Like, if you think about, even playing a game at an expo or a conference or something, like maybe you need a second player. So you turn to the person next to you and say, hey, do you want to play? Which is probably, if you're just on the subway or whatever, you're probably not just going to turn to the person next to you and try to strike up a conversation, right? So even that small bit of games kind of opens up a way for people to be social in ways that they wouldn't otherwise. And what I think is really fun about designing games for public space is that you can kind of normalize a lot of behavior between people that wouldn't be normal otherwise, right? So I'm always interested in that when you think about public space games, right? Like how the social relationships will change, and also how communication and those sorts of things change the difficulty of games played in public space, right? You have crowds, you have people watching you, you have someone probably depending on you if it's a collaborative game. So it kind of adds this whole different, like, I don't know if immersion is the right word for it, but a whole different dimensions to the kind of games that you can play, which is not to say that it doesn't exist for games played in private.
Sure.
Just it's a whole different set of things that I think we don't always consider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I came at it Both, I really like local multiplayer and the social dynamic that comes from that. But beyond that, I also really like this idea of creating experiences that feel like magic. And that's something that installation games can do really well. Like, we know it's technology. We know there's technology running behind it. But it creates a scenario where something feels really different from how it felt before. That's almost impossible to get with software.
Yeah,
and that's something that I really like about creating games for those spaces.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about the case study of Salmon Roll then. How did you approach designing this game with the installation at Play NYC in mind? What did you kind of do differently than designing another game, and how did it kind of play out in a way that might have been different?
Yeah. So we were, it was commissioned for this event, and one of the things, there really weren't any design constraints, but the hope was that we would make something that was, sort of specific to the space, site specific to some degree. And so, we walked around the entirety of Terminal 5, which is where the convention was held. And we tried to find somewhere that would, we didn't really come up with anything in mind. So we tried to find somewhere that would give us some constraint that would be interesting, right? We found when we both went to design school that what we thought we wanted was a totally blank canvas so we could do whatever we want. What we realized was that's terrifying. So sometimes it's a lot better to have something that has a little bit of a constraint so it kind of sparks your imagination,
And yeah, I know for this particular one, our first trip there, since it was all scouting, was also, we very deliberately didn't want to have a game in mind. Not only because the constraint is just useful for coming up with stuff, but since we knew that it was being commissioned for this particular space, we wanted to make sure that whatever we were doing was designed around the space and not the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. And so we kind of went in, we've both worked together on making public space games before, not always installation games exactly, but games for lots of people to play together.
We made a game for Come Out and Play.
Yeah, exactly.
A few others, and just our other work with Death by Audio Arcade.
Totally. And so one of the things that we've found in making games for public space is that something that's really helpful is that if the person who's waiting in line to play the game can understand the game just by watching it. So we kind of went in hoping to come up with the mechanic where that would be the case, right? Because we've both been at conventions before where we've had to pitch more complicated games, and by the 12th hour of the first day, it's really exhausting.
This wasn't the place for deep strategy.
Right.
Exactly. And there's also a nice social thing that happens there. There's less friction. People can just get into it. They can shout strategy. That they don't need a long introduction to it. So we kind of went in knowing that we wanted to find somewhere that had a little bit of a constraint in it, and we knew we wanted to make something that people could understand just watching. So we found this wall that had all of these raised circles all over it. Just plywood, not super far away from the wall, but they were...
Yeah, they were raised maybe half an inch off the wall.
Yeah.
Facing out.
Exactly. So we were really taken by that because it's so weird. Who does that? I haven't seen that, anywhere else.
Well, and they were polka dots that were the same color as the wall.
Yeah, there was really no explanation.
It's really
if any architects of Terminal 5 want to talk to us about it, I would love to do that. But we have no idea why that was the case. And so we were really taken by that. And we started to think about what we could make that would that could maybe take that wall into account and also lend itself to people, understanding the game easily. And the more that we looked at this wall, we were like, this feels like our level design has been done for us in some way. Maybe we can use this as a design for a level. And it ended up reminding us of this game that we've played before called Ice Cold Beer. I feel like most people don't know about it, but it's the inspiration for Tumbleseed, which is the idea being that there are these holes, and you control a plank that has a ball of some sort rolling on it, and you have to sort of tilt the plank so that you can avoid the bad holes and get to the good hole. And
it's worth noting, this isn't a digital game.
Right.
Yeah. There's a pinball resting on this thing.
Old school, Midway.
Yeah,
exactly.
Midway kind of style. Yeah.
And when you see people play it, we see people play it at MagFest. They're super intense. It's really quiet and but every iteration that we've seen so far has been single player, and we kind of were like, okay, can we turn this into a multiplayer game to take advantage of all the people here? you know, what would that feel like if we blew this game that's usually, you know, not all that big, and it's a pretty narrow cabinet, and it takes place along this like physical space, and it's really, really hard, and it's one person, they focus really hard. What if we instead made it about yelling at your friends?
Which, to be fair, that's your goal with most games.
It is my goal that I've made ever. But I'm glad you went along with it.
I like yelling. What's wrong with yelling?
So yeah, so that's sort of the way that we came at designing the game, and we can talk about designing the controller too if you want.
That's right where I was gonna lead. So
it's worth noting too that the ice cold beer thing was not the first thing we came up with. Like we found that spot and we're like, oh, this spot's rad. We took a bunch of pictures. We were just sketching things in notebooks, and like Jane said, like for sure that was our level design. We knew that, but we had a few other ideas of just like how we would do it, like what the game would be that would use this as the level. And eventually we got to this ice cold beer.
Right, totally.
Cool.
So the controller.
Yeah.
So one of the things, so we wanted to, you know, differentiate it from games like Ice Cold Beer or Tumbleseed. And the way that we figured we could do that, you know, among other ways, was to make it multiplayer, right? So taking this thing that usually just goes on in your own head and exploding it out, so now you have to coordinate and communicate with people in this loud environment, blah, blah, blah. But what we really wanted to make sure of was that people couldn't just play it single player anyway, right? Like, if we were using two joysticks and the two joysticks are right next to each other,
you can feasibly...
you just hold them. No big deal. You can game the system. So we were trying to figure out a way that we could make sure that the players would be far apart. We didn't have that much, like, we had a lot of space to work with, but we didn't have many, like, things we could latch onto.
There was, like, one pillar and nothing else in our space, and we're like, cool, we'll put one control on that pillar, and the other control will go somewhere.
From the ceiling, like, on plinths. We had a lot of
that. It turns out the tech people at Terminal 5 were not into the idea of us hanging stuff from their ceiling.
But so we decided eventually that we could just physically separate the players ourselves. If we made a controller that was so long that the average person's wingspan would not fit it.
Yeah.
So go for it.
Just that there's like a series of texts between us when we were thinking about this. Like we've been like struggling with this idea, and they were all like half joking, like not quite theirs.
Wouldn't it be stupid if it was just a big piece of wood? Ha ha ha. Well, that would be funny.
But wait a minute.
We can't put them on the, like, we don't have another pillar. What are we gonna do? And I'm like, well, what if it's just a big piece of wood and they both hold it? And they're like, well, that could work. It's really long though. We'll put handles on it. Like, okay. And then we're like, oh wait, we have a game about characters moving this like long piece of wood around.
Yeah.
And we could just make that.
Right.
We could have the people do the thing that they're doing.
And then like 5 or 6 texts that were like, is this stupid? I think it's stupid. Maybe that's okay.
Maybe like an MS Paint diagram that's like a rectangle and then like a circle at either end. And we're like, this is the controller.
Yeah.
If it's stupid and it works, it ain't stupid.
Exactly. And in fact, stupid and works is pretty great.
Yeah.
How to use it too.
That was one of the things that struck me the most about the way that you set that up with Salmon Roll, is that even though you had to control it a little differently, there's a joystick on the end, it was immediately apparent what you were doing. And like you were saying, you didn't have to explain anything about this game. You could just pick up this big old 2x4, basically, and play with some random person out of the crowd, which was great. What kind of hurdles did you run into with this? Was there anything that kind of threw a monkey wrench in the works?
Yeah, I was on site a lot. We had about 5 weeks to build this, which is already like not a ton of time, very little time, in fact. And I was on site about once a week during that time, and the technical requirements were kind of wild, of just like, because, you know, we were dealing with this conference that was dealing with Terminal 5, and like Terminal 5 is a major venue, like we're nothing special for them. They do stuff every night. In fact, we are a pain in their ass because most people just want to make sure they're like well lit and well mic'd. And so I'm like talking with their people, be like, can we hang things here? And she's like, I don't think so. Let me check with someone. And of course, I never hear back.
Right.
And like, to be fair, the people at Terminal 5 were not being bad. It's just like we had weird requests in a short period of time. And so there was a lot of questions of just, we're trying to build this thing in Unity, and at the same time being like, where are we projecting from? We need to figure that out. How are we wiring this up? Where's the computer going to live?
Do we have power? Yeah.
Do we have power?
Yeah, that's true. I think the other thing, too, was in making the controller, we had a couple of, like, further crazy ideas. Like, we were trying to figure out how to... So, like, and this is something that everyone asks us, is, you know, both people are holding either end of the controller, and you use a joystick to manipulate it. Well, why can't you just use an accelerometer? Then you could really just the movement of the things.
You know, jest.
Right. This is like when people ask about like online multiplayer in a week.
Just
from a hardware perspective, it actually wasn't hard. Like we rigged up. So we wanted to do accelerometer controls so hard. Yeah. We really, because it would be so cool. And the issue actually wasn't that it was hard to rig up. It was that it doesn't work. We would need a hinge in the middle of the thing. You said it's okay to get technical.
So, technical it up.
It's one plank.
Right.
And we have the players being able to move up and down independently from each other, which means it can't just be
that
or the other, and we can't just put two accelerometers in it because it's still one plank.
Right.
And they're both going to get the same reading.
And how do you distinguish between just holding it still and moving it up at the same time? So we were like, we basically, when we were trying to think about this, we had like sketched stuff out that was basically like a fucking Vive setup. You know what I mean? Where we need like sensors here, but in case this tilts, we need to like rig it like that and whatever. And we're just like, this is way too much.
We have some rangefinders to get like separate info on either side.
So we get some IR sensors, it was a lot. And then, you know, because it's physical, you know, we're software people.
We're software people, and we've made games for physical spaces before. We know that this stuff needs to just work.
Right.
And you know what doesn't just work? It's this kind of stuff.
Anything with sensors.
Well, and like, you know,
as soon as the word calibration gets involved.
Yeah.
Well, like an all ages event, which is always fun, but then it's like, you know, you have like a little kid who gets too excited and like drops the controller, and then everything is broken forever. Like with DBA, I'm pretty sure we've had like small children like jump up and sit on the cabinets before.
And drunk adults.
And drunk. That's true. I shouldn't say it's just the kids.
Children and drunk adults. There's definitely an area in the Venn diagram of those two things that is.
And you know what's like durable as hell is switch stick joysticks.
Yeah. Right.
So I think you know that was probably the biggest hurdle that we wanted to get over. And what was nice, I mean, not nice about that, but like what was nice as we went through that process was, I think we were just really nervous that, you know, it wouldn't be hard enough without that, or it wouldn't facilitate communication enough without that, or it wouldn't feel different enough without that. What we found was that actually, like, the controller that we rigged together kind of did lead to all that anyway. It led to a lot of yelling and communication, and, like, felt harder and weirder than, like, ice cold beer. And, like, it's funny, like, just the spacing of people and the handle part of it made people really prone to taking their other hands and doing high fives.
Yeah.
Like, I've never made
That's a great game moment right there.
Was inadvertently built for high fives.
Yeah. Which is not something you can predict. But so you know, that was a hurdle, and I think we were both sad we couldn't integrate some of that stuff in there, but it ended up okay.
Yeah, and I think also for a game, I mean, our game is obviously not as precise as Ice Cold Beer.
Sure.
Like you have a little bit more give, the ball is a little bit more forgiving, but at the same time, like, you need to be able to direct it pretty carefully.
Yeah.
And accelerometer controls, while fun, are not precise.
No.
At all. And a joystick is extremely precise. So I think ultimately giving players that ability to be really specific about, like, oh, just go up a little bit, go down.
Right.
Like that kind of movement.
You don't feel like you lose on accident.
Exactly.
That's an important thing, too.
Right.
Especially when you've got people coming in and out. You don't want people to have that sort of, you know, almost depressive experience of feeling like they just lost by chance. Yeah.
Right. And then they rage quit, right?
Right, exactly. Not what you want at when you've got a very expensive custom-made controller in their hands.
Definitely. Yeah, well, I think, actually, that controller wasn't too bad. I went to a local lumber place. I got like $20 worth of wood, $30 worth of joysticks, $20 iPack, and like $10 wire sheathing. So, it's not.
Yeah.
Quick itemized list. I was like pleasantly surprised at
You too
the
can
cost.
make your own 5-foot-long wooden controller.
Awesome.
And don't look at the seams too carefully.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's a great overview of kind of like what went into creating Salmon Roll and some of the really unique elements of this setup that attracted me to the game and really captured my attention. I feel like we've mentioned Death by Audio Arcade a bunch of times already, so I want to give you guys a kind of a chance to explain what that is for people that don't know what Death by Audio Arcade is.
Totally. So Jane and I are both on the board of Death by Audio Arcade. It is recently a nonprofit. Yeah. And so we are a games and arts coalition. What do you call?
Like
I'm drawing a blank on this.
Collective.
Collective. There we go. I'm going to start over. Death by Audio Arcade is a games and art collective. And what we do is we create new housing for games. So all locally made games, we work with the designer, with the artist to create arcade cabinets as well as other installations. So there's about 9 people or so who kind of make up the core group of Death by Audio Arcade, and then occasionally work with other people. Mark Kleeb in particular, or Mark Kleback in particular, deserves a shout out here. He is kind of the showrunner there. He is also the person who knows how to like cut things with a saw and then wire other things up.
Oh,
and he's
sure.
hanging out with a bunch of software people, which is very nice of him. And the way this started is he, like 6 years ago now, it's a while, was living at this DIY kind of punk venue called Death by Audio, which has become kind of famous in New York and outside of New York. But it was this really cool show space, totally DIY in New York, it's in Brooklyn. And while he was living there, he started being like, we should have arcade machines at these shows. And he's like, I want to make those arcade machines. So he had started looking for local game designers and started working with them. And so I think I was in the second batch of DBA games. You were in the third, maybe? And it was rad. Like, we just met with him, and he just helped us build these arcade cabinets. And, they were custom, and we painted them. And it wasn't like we gave him the game and he made them. The whole thing was we worked together.
Collaborative, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then Vice Media bought the building and kicked everybody out because that's super cool thing to do for underground culture. Report on them and then close them.
Yeah.
Anyway, but so Death by Audio Arcade then grew out of that, where he had helped to build all these machines. We all knew each other at that point. The people he'd been working with and him, we were all hanging out and trying to do other things. We started being like, we should bring these arcade cabinets places. So we just kept making stuff, and we still don't have a home. So these arcade cabinets now, there's about 10 official Death by Audio arcade cabinets. They're spread out in different places in New York. You'll actually find my game Particle Mace and Jane's game Slam City Oracles at Silent Barn in Brooklyn, which is another rad venue that Vice hasn't closed yet. And we occasionally bring all of them to events. We go to MagFest each year. We're actually getting bigger and bigger. We're an official part of MagFest this year. We're curating not only our own games, but we're bringing in other custom arcades. And I think we're kind of seeing a change in this moment, a change in the way people are thinking about games a lot. Where everyone really likes arcades, and everyone knows that arcades are dead, and everyone's bummed about that. But people are starting to do something with it, and there's always barcades and that kind of thing, and those are cool. But those are entirely nostalgia fueled, right? Those are all looking back and being like, I played Moonlander when I was 12. I want to play Moonlander while I'm drunk now. And there's a place for that, 100%. But this idea of creating new arcade cultures, and we're not the only person doing this. Ghost Wrench does this, Fantastic Arcade does this, Baby Castles has been doing this for ages.
Yep, up in my area, I'm gonna do a shout out to Arcadia in Portland, Maine. Same thing. It's become a kind of a beacon of the gaming community. These bar arcade mixtures, and it's awesome that Death by Audio Arcade has taken that a step further to support the indie community in New York.
And Baby Castles deserves a million shout outs here in New York. Baby Castles has been doing this kind of stuff since 2008. And they are still kicking and they are still great. One of the things that we see that's a little bit different is Baby Castles always wants new and not fringe exactly, but underrepresented voices always being pushed to the front. And they have a bunch of really cool cabinets that they just swap in to do whatever they want with weird control schemes, and there's loud stuff going on and a projector rigged up on the ceiling, and it's rad. And part of what we're doing at Death by Audio Arcade is kind of making more permanent installations. Where like the Particle Mace, so I made a game called Particle Mace, and the Particle Mace arcade machine plays Particle Mace. That's what it is. And that's the only thing that gets played on that machine. And so when we build these things, we build them to be objects that will continue to live.
Including the game. Like, they're a special arcade. I think all of us, or at least many of us, like, the version that's on the arcade game is slightly different in some way than the version that you'll get at home.
Right.
That's cool.
Slime City, there are, like, different achievements.
Yeah.
Particle Mace, right? That has something? I forget.
I mean, they're mostly kind of smaller tweaks. Yeah. Particle Mace has the local high scoreboard.
Right.
Like, you can enter your initials, which, like, I'm not going to do that on Steam. You don't need to enter your initials. So yeah, this idea of creating objects that aren't temporary, which I think in games is really important. Like, I spent my whole career making objects that I cared about deeply, but that which, like, literally took up no physical space in the world. They were collections of, like, ones and zeros, and they could fit on a flash drive, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I remember a while back, Brendan Chung, the game developer, started talking about making cases for his games, like just boxes. There's nothing in it. He'd make the box and he'd put it on a shelf, and he kind of modeled it after like old, like Atari boxes. And that kind of stuck with me, that having this thing take up space made it feel real in a way. And I think having these machines be physical incarnations of the games that they're on makes them feel real. It gives them weight, both like literally and metaphorically.
That's a super cool perspective, and I'm really glad that you guys are bringing that sense of physicality to the indie game scene. So to wrap things up, the thing we always ask indie developers when we interview them is what has grabbed their attention. So what other either indie teams recently, or even teams that are making something that isn't out yet, are you really excited for? Or do you think that is really cool that people might have missed?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yes, the indie scene is huge.
Yeah. I guess related to that, but we'd be remiss if we didn't mention it. Diego Garcia did all of the art in Salmon Roll, and he is brilliant.
God, he's so good.
Yeah, I feel like he's not as well known as he should be, because I think he's one of like the best living pixel artists, and also not pixel art. Like, I've never seen him not do pixel art, and then he did for this game, and it's great. And the whole idea of the bears eating the salmon was his idea. We like had this mechanical concept, and we're like, Diego, what do you think? And he busted out 3 brilliant ideas, of which we chose that one. So he's worth paying attention to, and also he needs to get some acknowledgement for being a major player in Salmon Roll.
I mean, if you have a dev audience, I'm sure everyone will know this already, but I feel like Leaf and everyone working on Itch is just changed the entire game. Like, sorry, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like they're my fairy godmother, always like coming up with the newest feature that like makes my life easier. But it is so like incredible to be able to develop without the like pressures and expectations of what an audience on Steam might have. Especially like I make a lot of games that are kind of like really silly, you know what I mean? That are a lot more about like a ridiculous sensory overload kind of experience than like precise game mechanics. And sometimes, the target audience for that isn't always on Steam. And it's been really amazing to be able to like post my stuff and like, set the rev share in a way that I can control and also give back. And like, it's just been so game changing. Like every game that I make is on Itch. And I don't know how feasible it would be for me to make games and just big games without it.
It has been an interesting, kind of as an outsider looking in, I started looking at indie games from Steam. I mean, I've been a PC gamer, that's just where I went. But as I've covered more and more indie games, it has always been remarkable to see Itch grow, and there's definitely a different vibe between Steam and Itch feels just so much more welcoming to the weird and the different and the unique. And I'm very glad you gave them a shout out. That's awesome.
Yeah, I feel like every other platform I work with, it's a question of how antagonistic I feel that our relationship is. And it's just the only one where I'm just like, no, it's great. Everyone should buy games on Itch. Everyone should sell their games on Itch. Like, no matter which side of the equation you're on, like, it's just the best one to use.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. We were part of a good bundle, which was, God, I guess at the beginning of this year, huh?
Yeah.
Which was a big fundraiser on Itch that like donated proceeds to, I think it was Planned Parenthood and ACLU. It's like 50-50. And it raised like some obscene amount of money. Was it like over $160,000, right? I thought both of them got like 80 grand.
Yeah, something like that.
Anyway, don't take my word for it. But
definitely look up the number.
Yeah.
But it was it was no joke.
Yeah, and it was really amazing to like not only feel like I was working on a platform that gave me like control and, you know, the ability to set it the way that I wanted to set it and like interact with people the way I wanted to interact with people, but that also was like so actively down to do good things. Like that was kind of just put into the platform as a matter of, you know, as a matter of course. Like we care about stuff, so we're going to do this. I just think that's so cool. You know, I mean, I'm not telling anyone to like never use Steam or whatever, but because, you know, people have different reasons for doing things and different audiences. But for me, it's been such a game changer.
Perfect. Those are a couple actually really great kind of non-standard shout-outs, and hopefully that's going to lead to us talking to the people at Itch. We kind of always use these as stepping stones to the next interview. So that's an awesome lead for us. Well, Andy and Jane, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Telling us a little bit about the design process behind Salmon Roll and the installation games you've worked on, and giving a shout out to Death by Audio Arcade. I'm sure there's going to be a good number of people that have not heard of Death by Audio Arcade that will discover it from this. So awesome.
Donations are tax deductible.
There you go. Awesome. There will be links in the description below to Death by Audio Arcade, to your guys' work, to all the stuff we've talked about. So if you are looking for any of that, look down there.
Awesome.